I know we were going to talk about some of the later, like the coffin lids from the first and second and third centuries in Egypt that mixed Greek and Egyptian contexts or concepts, and maybe this would be a good opportunity to do so to illustrate, like we were talking about with the Soter family and some of their different generational like blending of Greek and Egyptian culture.
Yeah.
So here's an image of one of the famous coffin lids that has been discovered, where it has a picture or an illustration of the sky goddess in the middle, and then surrounding her are the different figures that represent the different signs of the zodiac. Again, with kind of a blending of Greek and especially Egyptian iconography.
Right. Yeah, it's really fascinating. You know, just like the iconography of the zodiac signs in the temple at Dendera, you see the combination of uh, the animal or the zodion that is the sign, but also some Egyptian elements mixed in. Here we have the twins again. There was Pisces. There was actually I saw something cool on the Leo that I just noticed as you were going by. This figure of Leo here, you see that little thing that it's kind of standing on that looks a little bit like a lightning bolt.
Mhm.
That is actually probably a hieroglyphic sign that is one of the sounds that goes into the spelling of the lion, Ma'a or Ma'i in Egyptian. And so it looks like there's been a kind of a combination, for instance, of a lion, typical symbol, universal across the zodiac, but also a hieroglyphic sign that would be part of the spelling of the name of Leo in Egyptian or Ma'i.
Okay, cool. So this is the coffin lid of a woman or a girl named Cleopatra, that they've dated to, I think, like the second or third century, but it was actually part of a family of coffin lids, and her father's, as well as like other people in her family, were also discovered as part of the same discovery, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. This was a group associated with, I believe, a reused tomb in Thebes, and it's a Roman period family with a fascinating array of different names. Just to go back to the point we were making earlier, I don't know if you have that genealogy that I think I uploaded from and I put this is from a study of this done several years ago by Van Landout, and it shows the Soter family, and the scholar has put the names in their hieroglyphic form and their Greek form as they appear, and some of these are actually names that appear in Demotic. So the whole genealogy of this family and the labels on the coffins and their funerary inscriptions are written in multiple languages, and some of the people have very Greek names like Soter and Cleopatra, and some of them have Roman names like Cornelius Paulius, who's the father of Soter there. But the mother of Soter is Pimutos, which is she of Mut, which has been differently interpreted. Could be she who belongs to the goddess Mut, who's a kind of a mother goddess in the Theban region, or she who belongs to death. I don't think that the Egyptians would name someone that way. So, but what you see here is a continuation into the Roman period of what we also saw in the Ptolemaic period, families with multicultural and multi-ethnic identifications. And we know that Soter, who we also have a coffin from, was the archon, or ruler, is a Greek word, ruler of Thebes. And this probably means he was either kind of the mayor of Thebes or the governor of the Theban region. And so this was an important official who was possibly bilingual, and possibly, in contact with both Greek or Greco-Roman traditions and Egyptian traditions.
Yeah, I think this is his coffin lid, which also has the goddess Nut in the middle, and then it has the signs of the zodiac around the outside.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really cool because it's like it's like his coffin lid has the signs of the zodiac around it, and then his daughter Cleopatra's has the signs of the zodiac around it, and they both have Greek names, but then his wife has a mixed I think Greek and Egyptian name, right?
Right. And isn't there even there's one of the individuals called Kandake or Candace. We say it when we transform it into English, kind of.
Yeah,
And that's
that's Cleopatra's mother, and that's Soter's wife.
right. There you go. And that's a name that's taken on a Greek form, but it most people now believe it was a Nubian royal title, like the Queen Mother, that eventually made its way into a Greco-Egyptian. And there's a famous Kandake, Queen of Meroe, that appears in kind of literature. And Meroe is a name for the Nubian kingdom to the south of Egypt. And so, we don't know. That doesn't necessarily mean that this is a Nubian, but it might mean someone who's got a Nubian background. So from further up the Nile Valley. So we start counting it up, and maybe we've got four possible, at least four different names that can be traced to four different cultural ethnic origins between Greek, Latin, Egyptian, and possibly Meroitic, if you consider this name. So and that's not impossible, because Thebes, of course, is to the south in Egypt, and there was lots of constant contact across the border between Egypt and Nubian civilizations, and in some periods there were Nubian rulers in Egypt. So it's an amazing family that represents some of the mix of late Egypt.
Yeah, and it's like Cleopatra's brother and Soter's son had a Greek name, Ammonius, but it says that he like went by an Egyptian name, which was Petamenophis. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a great example of these double names that we were just talking about. So Padiamanophis literally means, translated from Egyptian, he who was given of, or he of Amenhotep. Okay, so that means Amen in peace, or Amen is pleased. And so if you literally translate the name, and then you take his name Ammonius, and that's a Greek way of saying belonging to the god Ammon. So the two names are actually sort of counterparts of one another, or Ammonius is maybe a translation of the Egyptian name Padiamanophis, or so it's again this translation back and forth between different cultural milieu. And perhaps this Ammonius would have used a Greek name when dealing with the largely Greek-speaking officials of Roman Egypt, but maybe residing in his community in Thebes, and with all the Egyptians that were there, he would use his Egyptian name. And we don't know. I think we don't have any evidence about whether these were bilingual individuals, but it's a pretty good clue when you've got this double naming, that this is someone who's working in two different cultural contexts.
Yeah, and so it's just a good like small microscopic representation of a larger theme that had been going on for several centuries at that point, which is, in that instance with that family, where you have an individual that might have like a Greek father and an Egyptian mother, and then you can just imagine then the child would have both cultural contexts that they would have grown up in, essentially, including maybe different things in terms of like the mythology or the religion, and different influences then that would have been blended together in the child, as well as just the cultural context that they grow up in terms of maybe having different friends or different associates, or whatever else that come from either an Egyptian or a Greek context. So we can understand then why Hellenistic astrology and this new system of astrology, once we become aware of it in the historical record in the 1st century BCE, that's already 2 or 3 centuries after the conquest of Alexander over Egypt, and after 2 or 3 centuries of this like intense cultural blending that had been going on there up to that point.
Right, right. Yeah. And it's just so relatable too to see a family like this. I mean, so many people in our modern world live in families of mixed cultural and ethnic backgrounds and racial backgrounds, and it's really interesting to see an example of that, and then to see it manifesting also in the traditions around burial, and the astrological signs and symbolism that they're using in their burial, um, uh, in this context. And I think it's hard to, we can call it Greco-Egyptian. I think it's not a bad term for some aspects, at least, of Hellenistic astrology. But it's also interesting to see how that plays out in the iconography and symbolism of the coffin. If I remember correctly, and if I saw it correctly when we were looking at it, the coffin has the same split of the zodiacs into the two sides. From between the solstices. If this is this our Soter sarcophagus again? I can't
So I
remember.
think this is Cleopatra,
Yeah, I think this.
his daughter, but I
Yeah,
think
I think it
Leo,
was. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think that's Leo in the top right, and then there's Cancer over in the top left.
Right. I think you could see if we can we skip ahead to the Soter one? I might be, or maybe you can see it in this one, but I think the Soter one, if you look at the foot panel of the Soter one, down at the bottom, I believe that is a representation of Sothis as a recumbent cow, just like a cow that's kind of laying down, which is one of the ways that Sothis is represented in the hieroglyphic inscriptions at Dendera. So we may have a similar pattern of representation as that zodiac sealing in Dendera, which would be not that far from Thebes, really. Some people, might even, I think some scholars have suggested that maybe the pattern of these coffin lids has been influenced or inspired by the Dendera zodiac sealing. And you have the same cosmological importance then of the recreation or the moment of birth and rebirth and the annual cycle, centered around the Sothis rising, the coming of the Nile, and the regeneration of the world. But in this case, it's put in a funerary context. And so it's symbolizing the rebirth of the individual into a blessed afterlife.
Right. Yeah, so they're incorporating different Greek and Egyptian concepts, and that's a really good point that you made, that some scholars, I know I was reading, like Francesca Rochberg, referred to it as Greco-Egyptian astrology, and I think there's a really strong argument for that, of referring to Hellenistic astrology as that. And that's one of the reasons I referred to it as Hellenistic astrology instead of Greek astrology in my book, and why I titled that, because I wanted to make it clear that it was a product of the Hellenistic era, and it was the type of astrology that developed in the Hellenistic age, when you did have that different blending of cultures of Greek and Mesopotamian and Egyptian, instead of just calling it, Greek astrology, because there's so many different elements being drawn from Egyptian and Mesopotamian cultures, that it would be a little misleading to just call it Greek astrology.
Right. There's a particular form of Greek cosmopolitan culture, largely in a Greek language, that's related to this period, which draws on lots of traditions and translates them. Greek, after Alexander, becomes a kind of international language of the Mediterranean and the Middle East in many ways, because of this political world.